Now let's go ahead to create the respective target servers which you want to join in our Prometheus to be able to configure logs. For us to do that, we are going to launch instances. So let's select launch instances, and you can just call the instance, you can just call it server, just put server dash. We are going to configure different names, so put server dash. We'll still be using an Amazon Linux instance, and then we will have the Amazon Linux 2023, which is free tier. And then for each of the servers, or for this server, we can use T2 micro. Since it's just a target server, we can enable or we can allow T2 micro, and then you select the key pair which you have access to. You select the key pair you have access to, and then for the networking settings, we are going to configure these servers to make use of Node Port Exporter. Now Node Port Exporter is what will enable us to move traffic from this given instance to our Prometheus server. And for us to do that, I want us to search the Node Port Exporter port. So which port do we use for Node Port Exporter? So if you see here, the default port for Node Port Exporter or Node Exporter listings on port 9100. So if you are configuring targets, these targets must have a security group rule that enables Node Port to be accessible on port 9100. So for us to do that, while launching our servers, we click on edit for the network settings. You allow the same default VPC. You can use the VPC where you have access to, and then I'll be launching the servers in a public subnet. You can use a public subnet in your own VPC, and then auto assign public IP, we allow it as enabled. And now we give the name of the security group. We can call the security group Prom Target Security Group. So it's for the target servers Prom Target SG. We put the same name here, Prom Target SG. Now for the security group rule, we allow port 22, which is the default port that enables us to be able to SSH into the server. And then equally for the security group, we are going to add a security group rule. Now because we want to install Node Exporter to enable us export logs from these given servers to our Prometheus server, we are going to enable port 9100. So while launching, we are going to add port 9100 as the port range which Prometheus will listen to. Now for the source type, we are allowing anywhere because it's for demonstration purpose. Now I want us to be able to connect to these instances on the console. For us to be able to connect to these instances on the console, we can equally add a port rule, port HTTP, for us to be able to access the servers on the console. So we can access the servers on the console or from anywhere, or we can access them using our SSH on port 22. So once you have these basic configurations, let's do a review. So basically you can give the name server dash, and then you give Amazon Linux 2023 for the instance type. We allow the instance as T2.micro. You select your key pair. You want to also select the public subnet or the subnet which you have access to, and then you click on create security group, where we'll be giving it the name Prom Target SG, and then we equally give the description Prom Target SG. For the security group rule, we have HTTP port 22, which is by default, and we have port 9100, which is for Node Exporter, which you're going to install on each of these servers. And then of course you can allow port 80 to be able to access this server on the console. Once you do this, for the number of instances, since we want to be able to monitor 2 instances, we are going to change this number to 2. Now there's some basic configuration. AWS says you can consider EC2 auto scaling to be able to manage these servers, but we are going to allow it as default 2 servers. And then now we select launch instance. So this is going to create 2 instances which we are going to use to perform our monitoring. Now if you come to our AWS instances, let's click on instances. You should now see 2 servers. You have server. So let's call this first one. You edit here and you type it web to indicate that is a web server. And then let's go to the second one, and then we click on this here to edit and you call it app. So this should indicate that we have 2 servers. We have the app server and we have the web server. So those are the 2 servers, the app server and the web server. Now we are going to SSH into both servers individually and then install Node Exporter on these servers. Back in this repo, if you come back to Prometheus and Grafana setups, you will see install Node Exporter.sh. We are going to be running this installation on our servers. Now while on instances, you click on web app. You can start with the web server or you can start with the app server. So let's start with the app server. Once you click on the app server, you click on connect and then you select SSH. Let's come to this session. Let's come to our terminal. Now I want to exit the session for Prometheus. So I'll clear this. Once I am on my terminal, I'll now run this command. Remember, I copied this for the app server. I'm running this on the app server. I copy this command. I come to my terminal and I install and I hit enter for me to be able to access the app server. So I'll select yes. Once I select yes, I should be able to access the app server. Now, once I access the app server, the first thing I will do is to sudo yum install git. So I'll do sudo yum install git. I'm installing git because I want to be able to clone the repository from our GitHub into the server. So I want to be able to clone the repository from our GitHub into the server. Once I do sudo yum install git, I'll now come to my GitHub repository. I'll come to my GitHub repository. I'll click on Prometheus and Grafana Learning. I'll click on code, copy the link to the repository, come back to my terminal, let me clear, and then I'll clone that repository. So for me to clone, I'll do git clone and I paste. So this should clone the Prometheus and Grafana Learning. If I do ls, I'll now see the Prometheus and Grafana Learning. So if I cd into the Prometheus and Grafana Learning and I do an ls, I'll be able to see the given setups. So I also cd into the Prometheus and Grafana setups. So if you do pwd, you should be in Prometheus and Grafana Learning and then Prometheus Grafana setups. So if you do an ls now, you see all the setup files. We have the install node exporter.sh. We are going to be installing node exporter in this given server. So install node exporter.sh. For me to install node exporter, I'll do sh install, I press tab, node, I press tab.sh. This should run the command to install node exporter on this given server. So if I hit enter, node exporter service will be installed in this given server, and if it's completed, you will see active. Now if I cut the node exporter file, let me clear my screen. If I cut the node exporter install dash node exporter, you see it's just basically running some form of command. It creates a node exporter user, it gets the node exporter package, uninstalls the package, copies the package to the local bin for node exporter, and then now we enable the node exporter service, we start the service and we check the status. So again, if you do sudo systemctl status node exporter, you should be able to see your node exporter service active. Now if node exporter service is active and you come back to your console, let's come to the instance which you've selected. This is the app server. So let's come back to instances. We come back to instances, we select the app server public IP, we open in a new tab, you paste the public IP of the web server, type colon, and then you put the IP of the node exporter. So once you put the IP of node exporter, which is 9100, and you hit enter, you should be able to access node exporter. So I'll take continue, and now you see node exporter is enabled. If I click on metrics, I'll see some basic metrics that are coming from my EC2 instance that I've configured node exporter. Remember, this is for the app server. I copy the app server public IP, I put in a new tab, and then I go back. I'll be able to see node exporter. After seeing node exporter, I'll click on metrics. Now this has installed node exporter on this given server. So let's go to the next step where we are going to configure our Prometheus to read the node exporter. Now while node exporter is installed here, if you come here and you refresh your target, you won't see any new target here. In the next module, we are going to be adding the app server as a target for our Prometheus collect logs.